Welcome to another episode of Topline Talks with me, Owen Lyons.
And me, Jenna Mackey.
As a multi-sector finance recruiter, our aim is to bring you inspiring stories and guests from across lots of different sectors and industries. In the episodes, we're going to talk about people's career backgrounds, we'll talk about the industries they work in and their talent insights along the way. Today, we're absolutely delighted to be joined by Rhiannon Bryant, who's Director of FP&A at Kantar. Rhiannon, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Very good. Looking forward to an entertaining conversation.
Indeed, let's hope so.
Just to kick off for our listeners, can you do just a brief intro as to who you are, what you're about, and why you're here, what you're hoping to get from the conversation?
Yeah, of course. So my name is Rhiannon Bryant. As you kindly introduced me, I'm the Director of Group FP&A at Kantar. So I've been there for about a year. I have had a career that has spanned more years than I can remember in finance, mostly in corporate, mostly in FP&A. Worked across a number of international businesses over that time, but had quite an untraditional start, I would say, into a finance career. So yeah, just thought it would be interesting to share a bit more about my story, and hopefully if people listen and realise, you don't always have to follow a predefined route into finance. It is possible to be successful through other routes. So hopefully someone will hear it and maybe be inspired, who knows?
Good. Well, that's what it's all about.
Or amused, at least.
One of the things Jenna and I were chatting about when we were prepping for the conversation was actually a lot of the mandates that we get, people have a preconception as to, what a great profile looks like or what a trodden path looks like. And I guess one of the fascinating things about your career history is actually you've dipped into lots of different sectors, generally within corporate finance, FP&A side, but going into lots of different sectors. So I guess, how have you done that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm definitely a person who it takes a lot for me to stay interested. So for me, it's been really quite important for me in my career to change industries and change different companies in order to sort of stay interested and to challenge myself. I think for me, every time I've gone into a new role, particularly in the early part of my career, I've always thought about where it is that I want to go next. And that's really coming from a skill set perspective. So I qualified actually at the BFI, which is a charity by definition. And I was really keen to sort of move into a more commercial space. I moved on from the BFI, where I focused predominantly on their film sales and their, at the time, was it DVD sales, so showing my age. And I moved on to Discovery Networks from there, which is the TV broadcaster. I went into, so I was a business partner at the BFI, and then I actually moved into an accounting role, which probably wouldn't have been necessarily my first choice because I did want something more commercial. But actually moving sort of from media to media was great. Absolutely loved it at Discovery. Really sort of fun place to be with TV and all of the kind of the perks and whistles that go with that.
Did you travel much on site?
No, I mean, I was yes, a little bit. So not too far. So during the time that I was at Discovery, we did a lot of M&A. So we bought one of the biggest broadcasters in Scandinavia, SPS Media. So there was quite a bit of travel over to those countries to integrate them. We also bought Eurosport at the time that I was there. So there was quite a lot of travel to Paris as well. So I think not always your sort of most glamorous locations, but it was definitely good to get out and experience different cultures, visit different cities. M&A integration is always
intense, right?
Intense, exactly, and doing system cutovers and things like that. But actually, Discovery was probably the best company that I've ever worked for in terms of processes and systems. And as many years ago as that was now, I still sort of really take a lead from some of the things that we did there and try to use that in other places that I've gone on to work as well.
You mentioned the M&A stuff.
Yes.
I would say a lot of people very much wanted to get that sort of exposure. In your experience, what is the reality of going through some sort of transaction like that from a finance perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think but Discovery was so huge, so I wasn't necessarily involved in the M&A side from like a corporate perspective. When I later on in my career, some years later, when I worked at Cognito, which is a global group of private schools, there was a considerable amount of M&A there. I think what's been really interesting is at Discovery, I was more involved on the integration side. I did a little bit on due diligence around kind of the pre-transaction reviews and things like that. But that was more around the integration. And then by the time I got to sort of Cognita, we did have a dedicated M&A team, but it was very, very interesting to look at exit multiples, purchase price, like the impact on cash flows, what that does to financial performance. So the joy of Cognito was that it's a very big company, but it had a very small group team. So actually, whilst I was head of Global FP&A there, I did have a kind of a treasury hat on for quite a bit of that. So very, very interesting to be dealing with banks, lenders, rating agencies, and really getting a real broad experience around kind of the impact of M&A on performance and how that is valued in the market. So
how did you get to be in a position where you were the one that put your hand up and said, that's what I want to do versus anybody else?
I think it was more, there was no one else to do it. I mean, I do remember from memory without stitching anyone up, there was a model that was something like 186 tabs on Excel, nice. Which I don't know if it was like a trick to drive someone mental. It was almost successful. And really it was, I got thrown in the deep end there and it was, I think sort of my biggest successes in my career have been when you've had those kind of like, I won't swear, those moments where you're like, if I screw this up, like this is going to be bad. And you're kind of motivated a little bit by fear.
Yeah.
And that was a really good example of that. I mean, I was asked to rebuild this cash flow and it was used for like funding decisions and all these external stakeholders that were interested in, our cash position and leverage and all of this stuff. And it was completely new. And I just threw myself into it. And very soon after was when COVID hit. So I'd gone to sort of all this, gone through this journey to build all these files and all these forecasts and these models. And then COVID came along and then we had to essentially rip it all up and start again and work with all the regional teams to bottom up sort of direct cash flow forecasts. So I think it's, it's very interesting in I'm sure many people who went through COVID in a business, it was, as awful as it was a very exciting time for businesses because it created a lens to look at businesses and to look at what you were doing in quite a unique way, which we can only hope is not going to happen again. But actually the skills that I got off of the back of that, quite difficult kind of market conditions and those difficult situations around how the business was operating was actually incredibly valuable. So every cloud and all.
Every cloud. You are the second guest to tell us exactly that. And I think he was also in FP&A.
Yes.
So I think there's something about being in that kind of more analytical commercial side where you're leaned on quite a lot in those stressful times.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, what was always quite interesting when I worked at Heathrow was, the disaster, not the tragic disasters, but the sort of operational disasters were the periods where it became really interesting to sort of look at impact of these these events on operations. So I don't think I was there at the time, but like the volcanic ash cloud in Iceland and, even sort of a bout of snow on your runways and strikes with BA, like all of this stuff was really interesting. And I think actually, I'm definitely a person who kind of thrives off of that really sort of exciting energy and a sense of emergency. And I think, you have in any walk of life, whether it's career or personal, I think you get your best growth through times of discomfort. And, that applies definitely to your career. And I think, you just have to be open-minded and muscle down, get your head down and know that you will come out the other side better. It doesn't always feel like that at the time, but I think, that is, I think probably the biggest successes that I've had is through these very, very challenging tasks and difficult, scenarios, really. So always try to welcome them slightly with open arms.
So bringing us back to Kantar.
Yes, indeed.
So what's your remit as Director of Group FP&A?
Yeah, so it's sort of changed more than it hasn't, I would say. So I joined a year ago looking after our global FP&A processes, so planning, forecasting, monthly board reporting. It's a very, very large company. I mean, I think we have anything between sort of 150 to 300 people in FP&A globally.
Wow.
And I've sort of have taken on other things around business partnering. And then the biggest sort of thing that I am running now is a few projects around the space of data. So it's a very, very trendy kind of subject matter. I would say, Kantar is a data specialist. We literally make our money off of managing data and providing data insights to some of the world's largest brands. And actually, when it comes to our own data, there's definitely some room for improvement there. So that's a global initiative that I'm currently leading on through a number of different projects that are all interlinked, but it keeps me busy. It keeps me awake at night.
All the good things.
Through excitement more than concern, I would say. But, there's a real opportunity in this space. And I think, the world of finance will look very, very different in 5 years' time, I think, in the way that we use data and we can capitalize on automation of systems and all of these wonderful things. So it's an exciting time to be there. There's lots of opportunity to deliver a lot of global improvements. And I think when you're working at a company of that scale, it is a toss-up between kind of absolute overwhelm and complete excitement of the impact of the change that you can deliver globally, definitely.
Yeah. How much does AI have a part to play in all of this?
So the here and the now, I think everyone gets very overexcited by AI, I would say. I think the potential for the future is huge, for particularly in the space of FP&A, trend analysis, forecasting, automation. But I think, the big thing that is often overlooked with all these wonderful tools is the quality of data.
Yeah.
So I think, that is something that, Kantar is probably the biggest organization that I've worked at. It's probably the most decentralized and unstandardized. And that presents a lot of challenges when it comes to being able to capitalize on those potential benefits. But, there is more and more capabilities coming out, more and more technology. And actually, we have launched a very recent strategic partnership with a technology provider that I probably can't tell you too much about. But that is really all about how investment in AI and technology can help to really drive value in our business. So it's going to be a very, very exciting 3 years for Kantar, both operationally, but also within finance and what we can do in that space. And I think everything that I'm trying to do in that space, in the data space over the next sort of 12 to 18 months, paves the way to be able to sort of reap the benefits of AI, really. So I think no specific plans yet, but it's definitely in the forefront of my mind around what is possible for sure.
That's so exciting. I feel like as Kantar, you need to be at the forefront of that stuff if that's what your whole business is about.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, you know, our technology and our client-facing platforms are going to be what the clients see, what the public see, and there is a lot of investment that goes into that around product innovation, you know, how we sell products, how clients can access our products. But actually, you know, we do need to put our money where our mouth is and make sure that we are, you know, capitalizing on all of the value that data can give us, you know, and our shareholders and all of the people that are interested in our performance, lenders, etc., banks. You know, there's a lot out there that we can pull together to really sort of tell the story. And I think, you know, that's an area I've certainly found across my career is, you know, we call it FP&A, but the A is often lagging. In many of the companies that I've worked at, really, you know, lots of F, lots of P, but the A is the fun stuff, right? So, you know, that's really where you can start to drive change, where you can start to influence decisions. And that's really the place to improve, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, you've mentioned COVID, and I'm sure it's a very overly spoken subject, but I think it's really interesting. Obviously, you were at Cognita during COVID. You were probably at Kantar when the market was pretty good, I would imagine. But now you've probably come to the other side where tech businesses have been struggling a little bit more. Other industries have been struggling a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, so I joined Kantar, a year ago, which would have been 23. So I think, so I guess what happened, you know, on a macro level, the back end of COVID is I think that there was a real downturn in a lot of markets. So the North America market has really suffered. I think a lot of that is driven by tech, but more recently, tech is starting to recover in North America. You know, UK, we obviously had the whole kind of Liz Truss debacle, overshadowed by the Queen dying. I think she probably would have been
lucky there.
She did get lucky. Should have been in office a lot less time if the Queen hadn't have died in the middle of that. I think it was, you know, record time. But, you know, that had a significant impact on the UK economy. But actually our UK insights business does incredibly well. It's our second biggest market after North America. So there has been a lot of challenges. And I think, you know, working across or operating across so many countries, so Kantar operates in 69 countries today, you know, working in FP&A, it can be quite overwhelming to try and get your head around exactly what's going on where. Because, you know, there's a different story in every market. Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, there's always a challenge. There's always something. There's something to overcome. And I think, you know, I don't know if it's sort of having become more senior as I've progressed, you know, past COVID, but, you know, there's always more challenge, I would say, and more risk to manage in these environments now. And I think, you know, that's where I think a lot of FP&A will start to add more value, is actually managing those risks, capitalizing on opportunities. And I think more so probably in the business partnering space is really actually understanding where we can dig deep to find growth and, you know, start looking under rocks that we might not have looked under before, and really getting quite creative in how we drive growth and performance, really.
A question I've got, which I think will be really interesting to listeners, is we work with a lot of people that are looking to either get into or progress their career within a private equity world.
Yeah.
So Cognita PE owned.
Yeah.
Kantar part Bain, part WPP.
That's right. So Kantar was previously owned by WPP, wholly 100%, and it sold the majority share to Bain Capital in 2019. So for those people who aren't aware, Bain Capital is probably one of the largest PE houses globally. So they've been working very, very closely with management over that time. To continue to grow the business. There's been quite significant transformation sort of from an organizational perspective, but also from an M&A perspective. So we've bought Numerator, which is a huge panel business in the US, sold off other businesses as well, and they've really done a lot of work to increase kind of the equity story of Kantar in that space, definitely.
And what's the reality? So, leading FP&A and the narrative and all that good stuff. What's the reality of the demands of a private equity owned business?
Absolutely. I mean, I would say it is, it's really quite intense compared to that of a listed company. I think, often listed companies kind of chug along. They're often sort of too big to fail, I think, in some senses. I think, I did have a brief stint at GSK, the pharmaceutical company. That was relatively kind of slow, I would say, by comparison. But I think, the demands in a private equity organization are much, much higher. So, they really want to get into the detail of performance. They really want to understand data. They want to cut things in different ways. The goalposts are always moving. And I think that doesn't suit everybody. I find it exciting. I find it interesting. And I think, you're always there on the horizon around, is an exit coming? Is, ownership going to change? You've got all of these kind of fairly interesting dynamics to consider.
We've got another guest coming on who has gone through a whole cycle.
Great. Yeah, that's the dream.
She, I think along the lines of, when you're in the thick of it, you think, what am I doing?
Yeah.
But you come out the other side and you're like, well, let's go again.
Exactly. And I think, the skills that will give you will be highly sought after in the market as well. And I think, that's also, part and parcel of when you take a job and you're in a career. Not everybody will think this way, but actually, obviously the landscape of your roles gets longer the more senior you get. But I think, I'm always thinking about what's going to give me a competitive edge, because I don't have, as we touched on earlier, I don't have a traditional background. I didn't do a degree in finance. I'm not from the Big Four. So actually, it is a lot more challenging to get in front of people for interviews and to even actually get to that point where you get in front of somebody, just because on paper I don't, always fit the bill. So I think I am always thinking about what is it that's going to, give me a skill set that's going to be desirable for my career to come. And I think, an exit is absolutely one of those things that will probably, nearly kill you off at the time, but you will laugh about it years to come, all the lols, I think. But yes, exactly.
And so for someone who wants to follow in your footsteps, come up through maybe the FP&A route, like what's really your advice to them at kind of the early stages of their career, given you've come a slightly unorthodox route?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, it's... for me, curiosity is absolutely key. There's sort of, I'm trying to think what the phrase is. I think they call it's labeled sort of intellectual curiosity.
Yeah.
And, that will take you much further than a set of exams or a set of grades or, being an auditor. I think actually you if you can bring something to the table that other people are not bringing, then you become, I wouldn't ever say indispensable, but you become very valuable to a manager and to a team, because you are able to look at things in a different way. And I don't know if that's because actually I've got a creative background, a creative degree. So I did a degree in graphic design, which I can find some sort of tenuous links to finance.
Like a great dashboard.
Well, you
Great
say
dashboard.
that. So my current CFO, Michael Uzielli, he is an absolute stickler for formatting. And I 100% share his sentiment. So at the end of the day, if you're presenting to a board, if you're presenting externally, if it looks good, people will believe it. It has integrity. If you've got the best performance in the world, but your presentation looks like a dog's dinner, people aren't going to be able to absorb that information. And people in my team, they sort of joke about, being anal and this and that and 2 clicks to the left on your PowerPoint, but actually it's very important. But I also think aside from that, presentationally, it's a lot about problem solving. And I think, where I look for candidates as well is again, not always these, standard sets of experience, these standard pathways, because actually diversity is very important. It gets talked about a lot, but, it's not just hype. You do need people with different skill sets. You do need a steady Eddie or a steady Edna, not to be sexist, of course. But you do need people who are a bit more creative in the way that they approach things. And I think, through many kind of lessons learnt, I would say, I'm probably approaching sort of 10 years in team management, and, you do screw it up a lot at the beginning. And I think a lot of people, even to this day, they'll try to hire people that are kind of like mini-me's. And I think actually, I don't want to deal with someone else like me. Really? You have to start working out like what the skills you need, to create a well-rounded team. So, that would be my advice is to kind of, at the risk of sounding like a cliche, be really aware of what you can offer that somebody else can't. What is it that's unique about you that you can, where can you bring value to a team? And you take that and you sell it hard.
Is that how you got all your jobs in all your different sectors?
Well, maybe. I don't know. I think, I do remember sort of having obviously I have moved jobs a fair amount of times. So I have done a few interviews as a candidate. And I think, people who have had the very traditional backgrounds, sort of would look a bit puzzled at me when I tried to talk about how I sort of had, could use the left side of my brain and this and that. And they just didn't buy into it. But at the end of the day, I probably wouldn't have been successful working under somebody who wasn't as open-minded. And I think, my current boss now, Lindsay Smith, who's the Group FD at Kantar, I've worked for her for probably 7 years, I think. She's put a lot of faith in me to deliver, and she understands my quirks, and to this date, it's worked. I mean, hopefully, we don't get fired tomorrow, and you have to edit this all out. But but yeah, so I think it's hard to be different. I think sometimes, but you have to kind of be your own champion in that space.
Yeah. How much of that people chemistry do you think really matters? Because I guess what you've described is working for the same person in different businesses for 7 years, and that's quite impressive.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the more you go throughout your career is as much about understanding people as it is about, I think, the finance part almost becomes secondary, I think, as you move into leadership roles, particularly in organizations where there's a big degree of change required. You really sort of do have to understand people. Being a team manager, you have to understand people.
Well, that probably leads us on to our little Topline quiz.
Yeah. Oh, quizzes. Terrible at quizzes.
Yes, we do it with well, you can't get it wrong, so don't worry.
Are they numbers-based? I'm not good with numbers.
You sure?
Well, that's what Excel's for.
No, you'll be grateful to hear there are no numbers involved. But it's just kind of 5 quick-fire questions. Best not to think about them too much.
Okay.
And I haven't actually written the 5th one, so I'm just going to have to think about it on the spot. So are you ready for our Topline quiz?
Let's do it. Topline quiz. Here we go.
Okay, question number 1. Given Kantar have got a lot of people in Porto, what is the number 1 thing to do in Porto?
Drink port.
Fair.
Oh, wait, is there a real answer? Oh.
It's based on your own experience.
I thought when you said it was a quiz, I thought it was like you were testing me. Oh, yeah. I mean, definitely drink ports.
Any ones in particular?
So I couldn't even tell you how many port distilleries there are, but I would go for something that you wouldn't necessarily get in a UK supermarket. So they're all pretty good, to be honest. And it's right on the river. It's really beautiful setting. The sun sets over the river.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, you can't go wrong.
I've never been.
You should.
I feel like I should go.
It's absolutely beautiful. Yeah, wonderful.
Get it on the list. Question number 2. Third runway at Heathrow, yes or no?
Will it happen or do I want it to happen?
However you want to interpret that question.
Oh, okay. I'm going to go no. I think I used to live in Windsor, which was next to Heathrow, and it was hideous. The planes used to land like over my house. And I remember when I first moved there, I had like dreams about like World War II because you just hear plane noises. So I'm going no. Obviously, when I worked there, I was like,
Yeah, definitely. Question number 3. Would you prefer a world with or without AI?
Ooh, that's interesting. I'm going to go with, because I have a faith in humanity that we will use it for the greater good.
Question number 4. Of all of the sectors you've worked in, what has been your favourite?
Industry, I would say media is the most interesting. And I'll leave it at that.
No reason why?
I just think it's kind of, it was creative. And I guess, I have a creative background. I think there's something a bit cool about working in TV and film and all of these things. So yeah, it definitely had some interesting personalities, though, I will add.
Okay, great. And question number 5, London or Windsor?
London. Easy.
I mean, I would say the same, but
once the Queen died, I was like, I'm done. I'm out. There's no need for me to stay now. She's like one of my BFFs.
Excellent. Well, look, that wraps up our Topline quiz.
Great.
And that actually wraps up this week's episode of Topline Talks too.
Wonderful.
So thank you very much, Rhiannon, for coming. You've been an excellent guest.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.
And for all of our listeners, if you've enjoyed what you hear, then please do hit subscribe. We are on Apple, Spotify and YouTube. And for now, that has been Topline Talks. Thank you very much.
Cheerio. Thank you very much.